substituted, it was his first year of Roundup Ready corn. He lost that benefit from crop sequence, crop rotation that he had recognized and benefited from for 30 years. It wasn't even as good as his wheat because he changed the microflora and killed off his manganese-reducing organisms that make manganese available to keep resistance in the potato to verticillium wilt and also to scab. If you have a scab problem, potato scab, Streptomyces scabies, it's an indication you've got a low manganese. Your soil test may tell you that you have all kinds of manganese in the soil, but the determining factor for manganese for plant uptake is going to be the activity of your manganese-reducing or your manganese-oxidizing organisms in the rhizosphere. Glyphosate and root exudates is very toxic to the manganese reducers that make manganese available for the plant, because it can only take up the reduced form. It stimulates the manganese oxidizers that convert it back to a piece of gravel in the soil, essentially. That's why our soil tests for manganese don't really tell us much about what the plant's going to be able to take up. Most of our other soil nutrients, pretty good for zinc and boron and other nutrients. Soil tests give you a good idea. On manganese, it only tells you whether there's a potential there. That potential is going to be realized based on the dynamics of those organisms that are in the rhizosphere. So in southwestern Indiana, we have a situation where they grow melons on those coarse textured soils. They worry about manganese toxicity. Blamed the power plant for a number of years for polluting the area with manganese. We found there wasn't much manganese, any significant manganese coming out of the stacks. What they were doing is with melons, it has a very high reducing population of organisms in the soil that increase the availability of manganese. So their solution, and it's an easy solution for manganese toxicity, is you add a little lime. You stimulate your oxidative organisms, you reduce the availability of manganese, you solve that problem. The problem is that they would lime right before their wheat crop, which is a common crop before melons, and then they have severe takeoff, because wheat's a very inefficient crop for taking up manganese. Rye, in contrast, is an extremely efficient crop. You can grow rye on those soils very well because it pulls up the manganese, because it has the genetic potential for essentially reducing some of that manganese in the soil to meet its need. Oats is a pre-crop for wheat. Is the best control of take-all that we know of worldwide. The only place it doesn't work is Western Australia that I'm aware of. Works great in Africa, works great in the U.S., South America, works great in Europe. The reason is, and it's only with our newer oak varieties in the last 80 years that have been used, is that our oak varieties now have been developed for gray speck resistance. So that with gray speck resistance, which is manganese deficiency, or overcoming that deficiency, the oats that we have now produce a root exudates, or glycosides, that are toxic to the oxidizing organisms, manganese oxidizers, and stimulate the manganese reducers, so that it meets that need. And with oats, you change the biology so that it remains then for a subsequent crop of wheat to provide that available manganese to maintain the physiology for resistance. You get the lignotubers formed very rapidly, the callousing around the infection point. In Western Australia, there isn't any manganese there for those organisms to work with. Why in some of those areas they even have to apply manganese to the seedling wheat and use it as a seed treatment just to have enough to keep it growing. So that soil biology becomes very important. And when you have a very powerful antibiotic that changes that biology, it changes all of the other relationships, even though we may have had those interactions implemented in our farming practices for many years. The other thing that we're seeing is just a tremendous abuse of this chemical, so there's a lot of drift problem. There's a lot of pollution contamination. So it's in our water and in our air. You're encouraged to use it in your garden, on your concrete driveway. Read the farm ads, some of those things. It's a chemical that's being used so indiscriminately that it's impacting all aspects of our system. But again, you can't change one thing without changing a lot of others. And those entities, I haven't figured out on a PC how to get rid of that animation on my Mac. I turn it off. But again, it boils back to nutrient interactions, nutrition with the different stresses, whether it's abiotic or biotic, and the importance of maintaining your fertility. A little more challenging for you and the organic production, but again, you do that through crop sequence, through intercropping, through rotation, and then those materials that you can provide. One of the things that you'll be able to avoid, or I'd ask to get it considered, because I don't know whether it's available for organic production, and that's the use of phytase enzyme. Seeing an increasing use of it in the States, adequate ration, it's a very stable phosphatase. Most of the phosphatases are stable. And they last long after the organism that may have produced them is long gone. But one that concerns, and there isn't a lot of research on it right now, but what we're seeing initially with the use of the phytase is it's used in the feeding ration to increase the availability of phosphorus in the feed, that as that manure goes out on the field, we're seeing a tremendous drop in soil phosphorus levels. We've always recognized that phosphorus isn't readily available in the soil unless you have the mycorrhizae and some of those organisms to pull it out. But we've also considered that phosphorus in the soil as an excellent bank that's not going to leave, or that's going to be available for us in the future through mycorrhizae or through management of that soil to increase its solubility and make it available for plant. We've seen several areas now where the phosphorus level in the soil has gone from 60, 70, 80 pounds per acre down to almost zero after the phytase manure plots have been applied. The indication is that it has the potential then to solubilize that soil phosphorus, might make it available for the immediate crop, but you have the potential of flushing it all out of the system, and like many things that we do, until we understand what the full implications of it are, we sometimes shoot ourselves in the foot. The problem with phosphorus is that we have limited known reserves of it. soluble, poorly soluble, and available phosphorus in the soil as being a backup for it. Well, if we flush it all out of the system, we not only defeat the purpose of what we might be trying to accomplish in reducing phosphate levels in the manure for eutrophication, water pollution, but we may be losing a critical resource that we're going to have to use in the future. So I'd ask you to look at some of those aspects. If that's available to you, or if manure is available to you, to look and see what some of the other implications are and ask for some research in those areas. It's an area that we really need to have a lot more information on before we jump into it with both feet. Again, we can retrieve it through some of our practice. See a lot of long-term effects from the glyphosate. Again, as I mentioned yesterday, it's a very powerful chelator. We think of chelators quite often as being able to increase solubility of our nutrients. We use EDTA and ETPA and some of those materials as very good chelators to increase solubility for foliar absorption or movement of nutrients across the membranes. But we also use chelators as that compound that grabs onto another element and immobilizes it. That's why glyphosate is a very good herbicide, is because it shuts down the defense mechanism of the plant. But it's also a very powerful antibiotic. At 880 billion pounds a year being applied fairly indiscriminately. There isn't any other antibiotic that we use in any society that has anything close to that impact. So we worry about antibiotic-resistant bacteria and pathogens. One of the reasons why we're seeing salmonella concerns, why we're having food recalls, why we have to do extensive testing in our production and our processing facilities, just to try and ensure that we're somewhat free of an entity that's ubiquitous in the environment. Population changes or spore populations are different in different environments, but the organism is pretty much everywhere.